Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Dreamer Comics podcast. Today we are joined with a very special guest, Matt Hawkins. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's always a good pleasure to see you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. You're somebody I've learned a lot from over the years, and so it's great to have you and be able to learn from you, and really get a chance to talk about comic books.
Well, hopefully I haven't ruined you too much.
We'll see about that. So I want to start by asking you, how did you get into comics? Like, what was your first experiences as a fan growing up with comic books?
I never read comics, actually, until I started working in comics.
No way.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things when people learn my story, they get annoyed at me because most people that are into comics are lifelong sort of fans, but I never read them. I met Rob Liefeld at Mile High Comics in 1993. He hired me on the spot, and honestly, I didn't even have any interest in being in comics. I just saw, I was in a long line. My nephew was a comics fan, and I took him to a signing. I didn't know who Rob Liefeld was. I didn't know who Jim Lee was. I didn't know who Stan Lee or Jack. I didn't know who any of these people were. We waited in this 3-hour line, and there were 4 artists that were in front of me, and they're all artists in the comic industry now. Jonathan Sabal, Cedric Nocon, and who also actually introduced me to my current wife. And so there's these artists, and they were all excited about comics. And for 3 hours, I listened to these guys talk about comics, and they were showing each other their portfolios. And when they got to the front of the line, Rob looked at the portfolios and hired them all on the spot. And I was literally the next guy in line.
Wow.
I was working at a bank while I was working on my master's, and I really didn't like retail banking.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks.
Yeah.
And I really hated what I was doing. Here, suddenly I got to the front of this line, and there were these 8 young, good-looking guys. They had black Extreme Studios jackets on, and they all had, it was, Eric Stevenson, Rob Liefeld, Richard Ory, Norm Ratman, Dan Fraga, Marat Michaels, young guys. There was a couple others, I forget who all was there. There were some cute girls there, and I'm like, these guys are having a good time.
The rock stars.
And I just, on a weird whim, I was the next guy in line. I just looked Rob in the eye, and I said, hey, you looking for anybody for anything else? And he's like, we need somebody to write press releases and do letters pages. Can you do that? I'm like, yeah. So I remember driving to Crown Books. I bought a book on how to write a press release. I went home, wrote a press release about that signing, and I faxed it to him and said, this is the press release I would have written for this signing today if you would have sent one out. And he hired me the next day.
That's awesome.
And that was 25 years ago, May 23rd.
Wow. So, I mean, this was 1983.
This month. It's May, right?
Yeah.
So 20 days from, it's the 3rd, so 20 days from now I got hired 25 years ago.
Wow, that's crazy. Today's the 4th because it's Star Wars Day.
May the
4th
so
be with
19
you.
Days. May the 4th,
But that's crazy. So you were somebody who didn't know anything about it, and just by chance you were just like, hey, you looking for somebody? Jump on in. Let's get rolling.
I believe the universe opens up doors for all of us, and you either have the choice to take advantage of it or you don't.
Exactly.
And I think it would have been very easy for me not to have done that because I didn't care, really.
Yeah.
I had my career path. I have a master's in physics. Why am I writing comic books? You know what I mean? So it was really sort of weird. It's actually unusual that I actually finished my master's because comics was such a big thing. I remember May 23rd, 1993, I got hired. I was at San Diego Comic-Con 2 months later, and we were selling those Extreme Zero books for $150 a piece.
Wow.
Little full of logos. And I remember there's a famous story that I didn't know really anything. I was just sort of green, and I got up on the table and I said, I want one of these cool books. And and I threw it into this crowd, and it caused a riot. And we almost got thrown out. I thought I was going to be fired from that, but that's actually an early image story. People sometimes attribute that to the wrong person. That was me. I was stupid back then. But
I love it. You guys were rock stars back in the day when Image was first starting out, and the whole boom would happen with the death of Superman, and everyone creating Image and everything. It was really a different time back then. It
was crazy. The first comic I wrote came out in '95. Sold 700,000 copies.
Wow.
I've not written anything that's sold that since. So it was a different era back then.
Yeah.
I get 10, 15, 20, 25,000 sales now, and I'm stoked.
So what was the first comic you wrote?
Lady Pendragon #1.
Nice. And what was that about? What was the...
It was a Arthurian spin-off legend, what if Guinevere got the sword?
Okay.
And I was sort of obsessed with Arthurian mythology at the time, and I loved John Borman's Excalibur, the 1981 film, and really liked it. And I always thought, what would have happened if Percival had crawled up almost dead and thrown the sword back to the lady in the lake? So he died in the story, so I just finished the story where they came on the battlefield and the sword called to her and she took it, and it became sort of this interesting dilemma between the Saxons and all that sort of stuff. It was fun.
That's a cool alternate world.
Yeah.
How did you get that published? Like, did you just go to Rob and you're like, hey, I want to do this book, or what was that?
Yeah, no, he told me I could write and publish my own book if I wanted to, and that was through Maximum Press, which was the first line of books that I managed as an editor, and that was Evangeline, Battlestar Galactica, and Lady Pendragon. There were a couple others, I forget.
So with Battlestar Galactica, was that a license, or was that?
Yeah, it was the one and only license we ever had, and actually to this day, that's why we don't do licensing, or I don't do licensing, because no one gave a shit about Battlestar Galactica back then. We optioned the rights for 3 years for $5,000, and we single-handedly sort of revived the franchise in '94 to '96, because at the end of that, I never forget this, the woman from Universal Licensing, I went back to her and said, oh, we wanted to re-up. She's like, oh, well, Battlestar Galactica is hot now, so it's going to be $50,000 for the term and $100,000 minimum guarantee. And I'm like,
no.
Yeah, I'm like, what? I said, there's no reason why this is popular at all, is because we did this. And she's like, well, that's true, but it's still a franchise. And I'm like, I actually know her and I like her, so I shouldn't make that voice. Sorry, Cindy. Anyway, so Nick Ritchie came to me years later. He told me that I'm the reason why Dynamite. We talk about Dynamite really exists because we did Battle of the Planets with him and Alex Ross, because he came and said I want to do Battle of the Planets, and he wanted Alex Ross to do it, and then we did that. But I did that book because I just wanted to work with Alex. I like Nick. Nick and I are buds, but he came after me and said I want to do Red Sonja with you guys, and I'm like, I don't think so. I said, if I wanted to make a red-haired barbarian girl, I could just make my own.
Yeah.
And so then he created Dynamite Entertainment, or not Dynamite, he had Dynamite Entertainment, which was signed books and stuff, and then he did Dynamite Comics.
That's crazy. So how did you get involved in Top Cow? How did you transition from Extreme, or what was it called at the Maximum Comics?
There was Extreme Studios, which was part of one of the Image Comics founding studios. There was Maximum Press, which was Rob's offshoot imprint that was not part of Image, that I managed. And then there was Awesome Comics, which was Rob, Jeff Loeb, Jeff Matsuda, Alan Moore, Steve Scrooge. It was a big deal. I edited one of Alan Moore's books, which was interesting. After Awesome Comics went out of business in '96, '97, whenever that was, I didn't have a job, because Rob was not going to publish anymore for a while. He wasn't sure what he was going to do. And so I went to Larry Marder and said, okay, can I do Lady Pendragon for Image Central? And he said yes. And because I had known Larry from the early Image days. So then I published Lady Pendragon for a couple years, and then Top Cow came and they wanted someone to take over their publishing division, and they asked me if I would do that, and I was about to get married, and I'm like, yeah, it'd be nice to have some health care, so being a freelancer is not the greatest thing. So I took the job, and I started in April of '98. That was 20 years ago last month.
Wow.
Mark and I didn't really know each other. And the two guys that hired me, Dave Wall and Brad Foxhoven, they were neither one at the company much longer after that. In fact, David Wall was made my boss initially, and then about 6 months into that, he asked me if I would be co-presidents with him, and then he left shortly after that, and I became president of the company. I joke with Mark that I've been signing all of his checks and dealing with all his money now for 19 and a half years. Wow. Just lucky I'm not a criminal.
Yeah. So absolutely, to have that kind of trust. I mean, he definitely have it after 19 years. That's
well, he does. I'm certain he does now, but
back then
I wouldn't have trusted someone. No, I'm not going to let anyone sign checks for me after 6 months.
So a big question I have is, back in '96, '97, the market was definitely going on the downward tilt.
Yeah.
How did you still manage to stay alive at Top Cow and market books and make sure people were picking up books? Like, what was something that...
Well, we sort of tried to counter. Top Cow, one of the reasons I like Top Cow is they sort of counter-programmed. And Mark Silvestri had this just crazy, uncanny ability to seek out new artists and help form and manage them. And the way he did that, he did it with Mike Turner, with Joe Benitez, with Dave Finch, all these big-name guys now. He hired them essentially as his background penciler. They would draw his backgrounds, and then he would work with them in the studio. In the '90s, we had studios. Like, we had full, giant rooms full of artists that all worked. We don't have that anymore. That's been gone for about a decade.
I know a few studios. I know there's the Raid up in Toronto, and then they have Garage Art down over here in Burbank. But there's definitely, they're just a bunch of artists or freelancers who get together. It's not the same as being...
It's not a corporate one that we hire. Because back then, these guys were all employees. We gave them health care and all that stuff. It just, when the numbers started declining, we had to adjust to the economic reality. When I started, there were 15,000 comic shops in North America.
Wow.
Now there's
5,000?
No, there's closer to 2,000.
Wow. I thought the 5,000 worldwide. Is that right? Something like
I don't know the worldwide figure.
Okay.
But I know that 800 stores in the United States buy 75% of our books.
Wow. Well, thank you to those stores.
Yeah, exactly.
keep ordering Top Cow's books. Well, were you around for when Top Cow got started, or you came in a little bit after that? So
yeah, I was later.
so Mark had already kind of developed Witchblade, and he had developed a couple other IPs, and then you just kind of came in and you're like, okay, we're gonna get this rolling.
Yeah, and the first book I actually developed for Top Cow myself. So the first one I can take credit for was the Tomb Raider launch with Andy Park and Dan Jurgens. I put that together, excuse me. And then with, Rising Stars, Midnight Nation, all those books sort of came out. Wanted was a book that I picked up, and there's just been so many. I mean, I've personally written 300-400. I don't even know.
So anywhere Angelina Jolie gets a movie, you guys have been on it.
Yeah, that doesn't suck. So we've had some success in film and TV, and that definitely is a great. I look at it as great marketing for our book sales.
Absolutely, I think that's what it all is in comic books. I feel like you work in comics to make a great comic book, and what I care about is making a great comic book.
Right.
But to make it get to a mass audience, it has to go through film and TV to help get there, to really kind of grow the brand and let it become take its own life of its own.
Yeah, we're very media-driven culture, and I think if you look at all the big selling books, all of them have some sort of film, TV, video game tie-in. There's very few exceptions. I mean, Saga might be the only one that's in the top 100 now. So it's difficult. So it's you got to stress, and it's a long-term game. Like I've sold a lot of books, a lot of think tank books, but it took 7-8 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's sort of like you have these sleeper hits that sort of you continue to promote over a long period of time.
Yeah. I mean, you do so many conventions, and when you go to conventions, what's that like for you? Do you normally go there, and do you have I know I've seen your table. You have a lot of books. What do you like? How do you know what to give to each person, or what do you talk to each person to kind of get them interested in a new Top Cow book?
Well, I usually group things in books of 3. So Think Tank, Postal, and the Tithe. So I ask them what kind of books do you like. People always have usually an answer for that if they come over and look. And so I'll ask, do you like science fiction? Do you like slice of life? Do you like romance? What kind of books do you like? And then based on what they say, I'll steer them in a certain direction. And I usually have, like quick pitches for these books, and then I have a little bit longer pitches. And a lot of times, I'll just hand the person the book. One of the big things I'm an advocate of is it's very hard to get people to try stuff they haven't tried before, or they're not familiar with your work. So we give away a lot of samples. I usually give away 500 to 1,000 books on Fridays at every comic convention. Yeah,
and it gets people to come back to the booth and say, hey, I read the first issue, I liked it. Where do I finish it? How do I get more?
That happens, and it works because people don't, they get a chance, they get stuck in a line. How many comic conventions you see people waiting in lines for hours? So if you give them a book, 5, 10, 15 minutes, they read it, they come back, they want to chat you up. And I usually say, hey, I'm going to give you this book, but do me a favor, when you get a chance to read it, come back and let me know what you think. I've only once or twice in my career had people come back and say, oh, I didn't like it. That has happened a couple times. Most people that don't like it, they don't bother coming back.
Yeah.
But people that come back, they chat you up about it, and they hopefully make a sale.
That's how it works. So, talking about Comic Cons, we do have a Ontario Comic Con coming up this weekend. They are our sponsor this week, so they are the Inland Empire's only full-scale friendly Comic Con at the Ontario Convention Center, May 19th and 20th. And they have 2 full days of comics, toys, with over 300 people, like Chris Claremont, Howard Chaykin, Jason Aaron, and much, much more. So
cool. It was a good show. I did that one last year.
Yeah. I have not had a chance to go there, so this year I'll be there and checking it out and having a good time.
I don't know if we might have a booth there. I'm not sure, actually, but I know we were there last year.
That's an Elena question, I feel like.
Yeah. I know I'm not going to be there this year, but I think Top Cow is going to be there, yeah.
So, what's something I really admire about Top Cow is you guys take a chance on new people. You got, Cena Grace, Vince Hernandez, Hannibal Tabu, Seek Donnelly, Mel Kylo, Ryan Cady, Rob Levin. So many people have, just to name a few, I mean, there's so many people who have come through Top Cow as a place where they start and really build a career and build a name for themselves. How do you go about finding those people, and how do you know to give them a chance?
That's a good question. Most of these people find us. It's more sifting through these people that hit us up for work or come up to the booths. A lot of times, most of these people that a lot of those people you mentioned all interned for us for free.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to me because California has changed the laws now, and we don't offer free internships anymore because it's illegal.
I had no idea about that.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore. And we haven't done it in a while. So I'm curious if it's changing how we'll do some of this stuff in the future. It's actually one of the reasons why I started the talent hunt, because we used to bring people in. We'd let them work a booth. They could come in and hang out with Mark and learn to draw a little bit. We'd let people spot some backs back when we actually did actual physical letter or inking. No, I think that's just a matter of those people you named. There's probably another 100 that have come through that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's just. yeah, you just bring people in and kind of cycle through them. And I think it's one of the things where I've never been one of those samurai loyalty guys where like if someone wants to move on, I'm fine with it. You know, like, move on, it's fine. There's plenty of people who want to work for us. So I've maintained good relationships with most of the people that don't work at Top Cow anymore.
That's awesome, and I think it's, you know, it's a very relationship-based industry. You know, there's three things. If you can be good, fast, and nice, you'll find works in comics. You just have to be at least 2 of the 3, and preferably all 3. But if you're able to be 2 of the 3 and you stay around long enough, someone's going to find you and kind of figure out the magic formula to get stuff working.
I always thought the third one wasn't nice. I thought it was cheap.
I thought it was cheap. Oh,
good,
really?
fast, and cheap.
I think it's nice.
That's at least the one I've heard. I've not heard of good, fast, and nice, but that sounds better than good, fast, and cheap, especially if you're the one doing it.
Yeah, right. I mean, I guess because I feel like if you're expensive, I think you'll make it work if you're worth it. I think it's a building stage. You know, you have to start here and kind of build your way up, literally.
Well, there's this interesting phenomenon that's going now where people are refusing to do sample work, and I think that's a mistake.
Wait, I've never heard of this.
There's a lot of people that are refusing to do sample work because they want to get paid. And there's this movement now, it might be a millennial thing, I don't even know, where people are like, don't do free artwork for samples and stuff like this. And I personally think that's a mistake because all those artists like Mike Turner, Dave Finch, Joe Benitez, all these guys that have made millions in this business now, all those guys did a little bit of free work to get their start.
I mean, to me, it seems like it would be go even further than that, because like it's a chance for them to see you and get a chance to know you and see your artwork and give you critiques and say, I like this or I don't like this. How would you know to hire them if you don't know what they can do?
You look at a lot of the artists we hire now, it's part of the reason I do the talent hunt, but also a lot of the artists I hire now to do books I work on, they're established talents. Yeah. You look at a lot of people I've worked with over the last 5 years, they're more established. So we've shifted a little bit to working exclusively with newer, younger talent to working with more established because it's harder to find them now.
Yeah. So you've launched 3 successful Kickstarter campaigns now, right?
Yeah.
With Cyber Force, Stairway, and Golgotha.
4, September morning.
September what?
September morning.
September morning.
Yeah.
How has that been? What has that been like for you? Like, explain to me the process of going on Kickstarter.
I don't love it, actually. You know, I mean, it's very stressful, and it's not something I want to make a big part of our business sort of pathology or how we do stuff. And I know it angers a lot of retailers at times. I think for us, I looked at it as a way to reach new people. You know, there are people like my wife who buys all kinds of crazy stuff on Kickstarter all the time, but she doesn't buy comics, doesn't read comics, and she would look at something like that potentially. You know, so the thought is there's a group of people that are just online buying that material. Those are very stressful though, you know, and you got to be creative. So, you know, I might run 1 or 2 a year, you know, at most, probably 1 a year. And for me, it's like once I've fulfilled 1, I'll then wait for a few months and maybe do another one. It's a way, I kind of look at it as a marketing campaign. Like when I did Golgotha specifically, because that was the first time I'd done one like that, I was told repeatedly by everyone that that would affect our sales in the direct market channel. And it turns out that really wasn't true. You know, it sort of acted like an advertisement for our direct market sales and our follow-up sales. And in fact, our net sales were larger. You know, I don't know if that's a fact that it's a better book. You know, I'm a bigger name now. Who knows? I mean, you can't really credit anything 100% for anything. Yeah. But, you know, when you run a successful Kickstarter campaign and then somebody then later sees, they know that the Kickstarter campaign was successful, then they see the book on the shelf, they're like, oh,
I can give this a shot.
Let me take a look at it because they've heard of it. You know, having just heard of something is so important these days.
Of course. Especially with so many titles coming out, and I mean, I'm a big advocate for Kickstarter because I think it's a way that projects get made. You know, it's something that is so powerful, and anyone that backs you is because they support you, they support your work, and that's a great feeling as a creator to know that you have people out there who will back you and support you. And I think that's something that's so cool, and it's what I really love about Kickstarter myself.
No, I agree, and I think it's definitely a good platform. I think for us, we just don't really need it, you know, and I use it, so for me, I look at it as a marketing outlet. So I'll pick a project here and there that I think might be better served. You know, Golgotha was an original graphic novel. It was sort of an offshoot, kind of quirky science fiction thing, and I was, you know, we were working with a new artist, so I was curious if anyone would care, and it turned out they did, so it worked well.
That's awesome. So recently you've just launched Swing, which comes out June 2nd?
Yeah, first week of June.
So what's it looking like working with your wife?
It's pretty fun, you know. She doesn't really do comics, doesn't really read comics, but that was more of these romance sort of slice of life things are very female driven, you know, and I think that's what makes them work, and that's the primary readership. So I wanted to work and have like a strong female voice in the book so that it sounded more authentic. So working with Linda Sedgwick on the art, who also contributed significantly to the story.
She's amazing.
She amazing.
Really is killing it.
And working with my wife was good. So they were more involved with me, I think, on developing the story initially, and then I did sort of the grunt work of it, and then at the end of it, they came through and said, "Oh, no woman would say that."
I love it.
So,
do you have a cover for that? I want to see what the book is, because I mean, I read it and I really was like very pleasantly surprised with how it turned out. I was expecting it not to be my demographic, but all of a sudden it was something that was kind of just like
the cover. If you want to show it.
Oh yeah, check it out. It's awesome. It's about a couple that is kind of adventuring or deciding whether or not to adventure into the world of swingers.
Yeah, it's basically delving into the world of ethically non-monogamy.
Yeah.
Ethical non-monogamy, however you want to say that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting world. I think part of it was when we did Sunstone. Sunstone was so successful.
Yeah.
I mean, we've sold. Sunstone now is our best-selling graphic novel of Top Gal's history.
That's so cool.
And it's in the present. Not even in the 90s. Because in the 90s we didn't do a lot of graphic novels. There were not a lot of trade paperbacks printed. Like a lot of the early stuff was never collected in trades until much, much later. But Sunstone is our best-selling trade paperback line in history. And I did the book for Sedgwick as a favor because he was putting it out online on DeviantArt for free. And I'm like, this is a book about two lesbian girls that are into S&M together, and it's free online. No one's going to buy this if we sell it. And that's at least what I thought, and I was never happier to be so wrong.
Yeah.
When the book did so well, and then I started putting it on my table when I go to conventions, and I'd have these people come up, and they were really into it. They'd tell me how much they hated 50 Shades of Grey, how much they love Sunstone, and they're like, what else do you have like this? And they'd look over at Think Tank and Symmetry and Cyberforce, and they'd be like, yeah, we don't have anything else like that. So I saw a business opportunity, and so we started trying to develop a line of these slice of life romance books, and now we have them. And sort of the sex positive look. I think part of the reason why Sunstone works so well, because I talked to so many of these people at conventions, is that it was a sex positive look at a lifestyle like this S&M lesbian sort of group that people tend to shame, look down their nose at. And that community doesn't like that, of course. No one likes being shamed. No one likes being looked down upon for what they're doing. And I really, I really thought about it. I'm like, I've always felt that what consenting adults do in the bedroom is their business. I mean, who gives a shit? I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't know why people get so up in arms about stuff.
I agree with you.
And then I did a quick Google search in LA, and I S&M clubs, and one came up. And then I'm like, oh, swinging, that's another sex thing. Because we were looking for another sex positive thing we could do. So I Googled swinger, there's like 7 clubs in LA County. I'm like, oh wow.
I didn't know
so there's a 7 times the potential audience. Because like if you go to S&M clubs, there are some now that carry Sunstone.
Oh,
and I've
really?
already reached out to a lot of these swinging clubs, and they will carry the book.
That's so cool.
In fact, we're going to be doing, with Mike Wallman, and we're talking about doing, there's a club in downtown LA called Club Joy. That's a lifestyle club, and we're going to be doing a cosplay themed party there at some point to celebrate swing.
That's so cool.
Should be fun.
That's super exciting.
Yep.
I don't know if I'll be my wife will let me go, but
you can't go by yourself. They don't let single guys in.
And so that's a really fun thing though. And so what do you think you attribute that book being the #1 trade paperback sales to? Like just the concept, or is it what would you say, was it the marketing? What would you say is something that really adds to the fact that it's been the #1 seller for you?
I have no idea. Sometimes you just get data and you roll with it. It's just, Sedgwick is so good.
Yeah.
He's so good with his fans. He has millions of DeviantArt followers. I didn't know that they would all want to buy the book, but they did.
Wow.
And I think it's just sex positive. The art is amazing. I think people fall in love with these characters, even people that don't understand like a gay lifestyle or any of this sort of stuff. It's just the characters are so well written, and I think that's kind of the key. And that was, by the way, that was so hard for me to write romance, slice of life, because I'm used to science fiction.
Yeah.
And I've told this story a few times, but it's so easy to make dragons fighting spaceships look cool.
Yeah.
That's what Aphrodite 9 was, But having a couple fighting at a restaurant and then having to deal, make that interesting and where you give a shit about these people is really hard.
Yeah.
So it forces you to really focus on dialogue and character interaction, and that's interesting. I know you've read Swing. When I wrote the first draft, there was nothing about them in college. It started when she was coming down the stairs and he was playing video games.
Oh,
that's
really?
where I wrote the book to start. And the Sedgwicks both said, you can't do this, because that's how I would normally write a comic.
You start in the middle.
Yeah, and then you tell flashback, you have to make us care about these people. And I wrote 4 or 5 drafts, and I just wasn't getting it. And so Sedgwick called me on Skype and said, go watch the first 5 or 10 minutes of Up a few times and then go write again. And I went and watched that Pixar movie Up, and that whole whirlwind relationship thing in the beginning where you just you're just in tears by the time it's done. And then I went and sat down and rewrote the thing, and I banged out the draft, and I loved it.
Yeah, it made a huge difference. So whenever you write, what's your process like? How do you normally write? Like, do you do an outline first? Do you go right into it and say, okay, I know this issue, or do you think about it for a few days? And what's
I am an intensive research person. I've been researching 2 projects for years now that I haven't even started writing yet. And so I do a ton of research. I like to interview people, because I like to get like face-to-face, and I'll record these interviews. So a lot of times I'll pay them so I can record them. I'm doing actually 2 cop ride-alongs in downtown LA through the homeless shelters next week.
Wow.
So that should be fun. I'm hoping to get my tetanus shots, you know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. I think I take advantage of that research because it's fun for me. I have a network of people like in the scientific community I reach out to, and so I get invited to a lot of really interesting things. I'll be at Google's AI Lab this Monday, and I'm going to take a look at some of their cool stuff. So you know, that's the kind of stuff. It's just fun.
Is that for Think Tank Volume 6 or what's that?
That's another project. But so you know, I believe in outlining. You know, I know where I want to start it. I know where I want to end it. I don't always know what's in the middle. And once I have the beginning and the end, it's good. You know, and then you kind of, and I'll leave the middle a little more open. And I'm a firm believer in writing very quickly. I know people stress about stuff, and I don't believe in writer's block at all. If you're sitting there staring at a computer, you should just write anything.
Whatever comes out.
Type whatever comes out.
And you edit it and make it right.
No, because the thing is what happens to me when I start writing is I'll start writing, I'm a few hours into it, and I'm like, I'll think of a better way to do it. And then I'll just delete it. Yep. I'll save that draft, I'll start over, and I'll do something else. And the process sort of opens up your mind. And you know, I write generally out on my patio or where I can stare, because the one thing that is important is eye strain. Yeah. You know, looking at these computers. So I follow the 20-20-20 rule, where it's you try every 20 minutes you look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds. And I actually set a little timer, and I do that, and it allows me to focus better, make my eyes doesn't hurt. And then when I'm in the office, I sit on the floor. Being comfortable while you're writing is, in my opinion, a mistake. I know people that get these nice big chairs, these little plush things, they're fired, the little aromatherapy bullshit. You know, go back somewhere else, you hippie. But for me, it's like I like to be slightly uncomfortable. I sit in wood chairs, I sit outside, or I'll sit on the floor. I usually like to be cold. Like that's one thing why I write at 5 o'clock in the morning out of my patio. It's pretty chilly, but I'll go out there in a t-shirt because if I'm cold,
you want to get stuff done so you can get back inside and
yeah. So I write in 2-hour blocks. I'll write for 2 hours and then I'll take some time off and then I'll write for 2 hours. I write 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, and that's all I write.
Wow, that's incredible. So I wanted to ask you about The Darkness.
Yeah.
You said you had some big news to share with us.
Yes, we are launching a new The Darkness title. I'm writing it. Can't announce the artist just yet. I'm not finished with the contracts and all that sort of stuff, but we're trying to launch in October because it's Halloween and that's when we want to see the Darkness. I don't think it's going to happen, so it'll probably be sometime next year. I might hold it until October 2019, which could be fun, which would be 1 month after my 50th birthday, so that could be interesting. No, it's exciting. I'm really excited about what we're doing. You know, with video games, it's the top book we get requested. Yeah. It's one of those things where, you know, we had done 100 and however many issues of The Darkness, and sort of, we did some good runs, but just the sales weren't quite there, and the same thing with Witchblade, where we kind of take a little bit of time off and try to rebrand it, relaunch it, or do something different with it. So I'm excited about that and work with Silvestri on it, and we'll be announcing the artist, but I am writing it, so I'm excited to be writing a new The Darkness book.
That's awesome. Now, what's your relationship like with Mark now that you're essentially running Top Cow? It's something that he came up with back in the early 90s. What's that like to be working together, and how do you guys interact?
Most of the time it's phone, email. We try to have lunch once a week. He lives up in Sherman Oaks. I'm down in Culver City, so and the office is in Culver City. So we tend to communicate mainly through email and text. You know, if it's important, it's a text. If it's or a phone call. If it's not important, it's an email. And then sort of we follow up, but he's very involved in the projects like Cyberforce and The Darkness and Witchblade, and he's been working on his own project now for years that is near completion, and I'm hoping it'll be out either later this year or sometime in the following year. And I think this will be a project that is going to blow everyone's minds.
All right, I can't wait to actually check it out in person and actually get a copy in my hands and give it a read.
Very cool.
So I've got some questions from online. So this one comes from PJ Katakutin. He says, Matt, please tell me that you got to use your physics background in comics writing and stuff.
Yes, there's a book I write called Think Tank, and there's another book I'm doing now, which I just finished, called Stairway. There's a book I'm doing called The Clock, and there's a book, what is the other one I did with Science-y? The one I did with Linda Sedgwick, Wildfire. And these are very heavy science books, and so much so that I think that they have a more limited audience, because I think I try to make it accessible to everyone, but I do write a line of books that are very science heavy. Think Tank is probably the biggest one that has the biggest following, and in the back of each one of those books I do a science class where I try to explain some of the concepts. So, you know, when I mentioned earlier about 96, 97 when Rob's Awesome Comics stopped publishing, I actually thought briefly about going back into the military industrial complex and trying to use my physics background, and what I realized is, having been out of that for 4 years, I was lost. And I realized all the people that I had grown with had sort of moved on, they were doing these other things, and it was one of these weird things where I was like, I'd have to start over and be 4 or 5 years behind my peers, and it just felt weird, and there was a lot of things that my dissertation had been disproved, all these sort of things I had done, and so it was frustrating, you know, and I realized that I was going to have a hard time trying to break back into that field, and I decided to try to do Lady Pendragon, and then when that was successful, I did 18 issues.
Wow.
Which is pretty good back then.
Yeah, I mean, 18 issues is great now.
And then it was during the middle of that run that Top Cow hired me.
Nice. So there's this thing in comics that I've heard that it takes 3 trades to make something successful, to have it have life in perpetuity, so it stays on the comic book shelves, retailers will keep ordering it. Do you think that's the right amount of trades, or do you think it should be more or less? What's your opinion on it?
I can tell you, based on sales data, the first 3 trades always sell better. Okay. So if you're doing 5 trades, like I have 5 Think Tank trades, and I actually think the 4th and 5th trades are the best ones, but they have not sold as well as the first 3. So there certainly is some sort of magic to the first 3. Yeah. And I think part of it is people just forget what they've read out of sequence and out of ordering. Yeah. And there are so many books now. I mean, I think one retailer told me there's 400 trades a month. Wow. And 2,000 comics a month. And so keeping track of these things is very difficult. I think it's why retailers need, you know, pre-orders. They need to be told what they want.
Of course, and that's why you got to do the marketing. So Hannibal Taboo asks.
Hey Hannibal.
He wants to know if you're going to be doing more books for the rest of the Artifacts line.
Oh, that's a good question. Like I said, we're doing The Darkness, and Dan Wickline is writing a book called Tom Judge, which is The Rapture, which should be out sometime later this year. We are doing a book called Heirloom, which is based on the Heartstone. So there are several that are in development. I don't know when they'll all be out. I mean, right now, The Darkness is my big focus. Since I just finished Stairway yesterday, I'm really I have to finish up Sugar, and then I've got a couple other things, but then The Darkness becomes my #1 focus for the next several months. So I'm getting back into sort of the Top Cow universe of it all.
So how do you go about making a new Darkness book? Do you go back and reread everything that's been, or do you kind of go back and just say, okay, this is what the concept is, I know this is the take on the character we want, and kind of flesh out from there? What do you...
No, I went back and reread everything, and it took me a weekend. I think my wife was gone, and I just read everything, and I did that actually when I was writing the end of Witchblade. I wrote the final issue of Witchblade, 185. I wrote which was kind of cool for me. I wrote the last 14 or 16 pages of Sarah Pazzini's career, I just thought about it. I read them all. I was thinking about it, and I thought about kind of a new take and something different and a little more interesting than trying to make it different, you know. I mean, the original Darkness, you go back and read it, it's great, but it does feel very dated to the 90s. Yeah. So how do you update that and make it interesting? I really, really enjoyed David Hine and Jeremy Hahn's run. It was much more horror-driven, and the fans didn't really respond to that as well. So trying to figure out and navigate, and that was a choice we made. We made a conscious choice to make it more horror-based. Yeah. And it wasn't unsuccessful, but it didn't perform as well as we had wanted it to. And it's actually personally probably my favorite run of The Darkness, actually. Wow. I love their run. I think it's so amazing, which is one of those things where as a publisher it's kind of frustrating when you're so into something it doesn't necessarily work as well as you'd hoped.
It's interesting because I feel like it's a very weird formula. Sometimes you can really love something and it just won't hit, and sometimes you don't know how something becomes a hit and it does. And right. It's funny how that works.
Well, what do they say? You can't get lucky if you're not playing the game. Yeah. Or there was another quote someone wrote that I used the other day that I ripped off. It was something about, it's amazing how much hard work is put into luck. Yeah. People that work really hard, or something like that, some quote like that. But
it's true. You make your own luck.
People don't get lucky by sitting in their room playing video games.
Of course.
You're not going to get lucky. But if you're out there trying, like I did my start in the comic industry, 100% luck. it's such a
You were in
weird-
line on that day when he was hiring everybody, and you were just the next one up, and he's like, "You're
I just
hired
happened
too."
to be there. And I asked Rob why he hired me years later, and Rob and I are friends now. And May 23rd, like I said, will be our 25th anniversary when he hired me, and he and I are going to go grab lunch down Orange County and celebrate. But he just said, you seemed like you had spunk. I wanted some spunk in the company.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of fun.
I love it. Yeah, and Rob is a frequent guest at Jimmy J's amazing
Yep.
Comic Cons, and those have been a blast. He does a great job with those shows. They're like a AAA show every time I end up going. So I know there's some coming up, and those are awesome. So let's talk about optioning books.
Okay.
Because it happens all the time, and people don't necessarily know about it. And I wanted to ask you about the process. How do you know whenever you go into a room? Do you get a phone call? Are you the ones going actively looking for options, or how does it work?
It really depends. I mean, there are people that approach us and say we're interested in this book because they read it online and they heard about it. There's books that we will take out and develop a pitch and work with a writer, and then we go out and try to sell it. So it depends on if someone approaches us or we approach them. Completely different. Usually, if you're taking something out and trying to sell it, you'll do what I call the water bottle tour, and your agents will set up like 20 pitches for you over 2 or 3 days, and you just go and you pitch 10, 15 minutes in a room, and then hopefully somebody buys it. I've only done that once where we didn't sell it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, only once.
Wow.
And every other time we've done that, we've been able to sell it to someone, option it. And the thing I think people don't understand is an option doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean it's going to get made.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've had 54 options at Top Cow since I've been there, and we've only had 4 things made.
Wow.
So you sort of look at that. I don't know if that's a normal ratio. I sometimes see, like, we have probably right now 8 or 9 things under option. We don't announce a lot of it. And the reasoning is because people then
go,
what happened to the Darkness movie? What happened to the Witchblade movie? What happened to the Magdalena movie? What happened to this? What happened to that? What happened to the Think Tank TV show? What happened to the Postal TV show? Well, it just in the development process, stuff gets killed.
Yep. I mean, you can do a pilot and never see it, or you can even just do a script and it won't come out. I mean,
it's usually the script phase that kills everything. And it's one of the things that Hollywood frustrates me about is they'll hire these non-comic book fans because they're on some show and they'll think that that'll get it made, and then they'll come in, they don't understand the material. They'll write a script, and it's just not good. And at that point, it's dead. That's happened to us so many times. It's really frustrating.
Do you ever want to say, hey, I want to keep this one and write it for the small screen or for the big screen, or do you ever kind of say, no, we won't even option that because I want to be involved in it? Is that...
No, because I have no interest in writing film or TV. I mean, I think I'm probably one of the rare comic book writers that has no interest in writing for film and TV. I just don't. I've done it. I wrote on Power Rangers for 2 seasons. I wrote a spec screenplay 15 years ago that I sold, got paid a good amount of money for it, and never got made. I like comic books. I read a comic book, and guess what? It comes out. I can show it to my wife. I can show it to my kid. I can give it to my mom and say, hey, look, I'm cool. I get a big check for some screenplay that never gets made. What do I have for it? I have some money. Money's nice. I like money, but I don't need more money. I want shit made.
Yeah. It's a different, you leave behind a different legacy when things actually get made. And
Well, and they get made the way you want to get them made.
Yeah.
The one thing for better or for worse is I look at all my comics and I say, that's exactly how I made it at the time. And, I hire editors. One of the problems I've had is since I pay everyone, it's getting good notes from people. Because people don't want to, if you sign their check, they're not, this sucks.
Yeah.
They don't say that. And so that's one of the reasons why I love Brian Hill so much, is that I use him almost exclusively to edit my stuff because
he'll tell you the truth.
He tells me when I suck.
I think that's super important to have someone who's there who can be honest with you and actually give you and knows what they're talking about.
And Ryan Katie's really good about that too. Both those guys I trust. I send them my stuff and I get good notes from them.
That's awesome. So one last thing I was going to ask you about was what advice do you have for any aspiring creators, artists, anyone who wants to make comic books?
I think the best thing you can do is just to do it. And I know that sounds, it's like a trope, but the people that are being hired on books now are usually coming out of webcomics. I've noticed more and more of a trend of this is people that are being hired as writers and artists. They will go online, Webtoon, DeviantArt, or Tapas, or any of these venues, or even on their Instagram feed. They'll start posting something, they'll build a small following, and then often they'll do a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo. They'll raise some money. That gets on our radar, because I look at that and I'm like, I never heard of this person, I've never heard of this book. I don't know who the heck these people are, but they just raised $15,000. It doesn't even need to be $1 million. I mean, they just raised $10,000, $15,000 successfully. They have 300 people that, pledge this thing. There's something to this, so I should at least look at it. You know what I mean? And the one thing people don't understand as a publisher is you want to mitigate your risk. So people come to me all the time with ideas. They're like, oh, I gotta do this. I can give it to you for free. I'm like, no, that's not it. You don't understand. It's not the cost of paying you. It's am I going to sell this book or not? And so people with social media followings helps. It doesn't always help. And paying for Twitter followers, it doesn't help at all, because it's very clear to someone like in my position that if you have 50,000 followers and no one ever responds to you or retweets or likes your stuff, it takes me about a minute to scroll through somebody's feed. There's one publisher I know, a smaller comic publisher, that has over 500,000 likes on Facebook. And I look at their feed,
nothing,
and there's nothing.
And that hurts them too, especially on Facebook, because then their interactions go down whenever you, like, if they're sending it out to 500,000 people, it's going to go to a small percentage of the audience.
Right.
And then from that small percentage, it's going to go, and only a certain amount of people will see it. So if you're on that small percentage and most of them are bought, then you're just not going to get seen by anybody. So it's actually just hurts you.
Yeah. I look at, like my Facebook feed, it's whatever the max friend is, plus 5 or 6 or whatever, 7,000 people that follow me, and massive interaction all the time. You know what I mean? I talk to these people, I see them in person. I'm always shocked when I see people at cons sometime and they act like they've known me for years and I don't know who they are. I mean, it's weird, but I always just say, hey, good to see you.
But that's social media. You feel connected to people through social media because of, because of you see who they are, what their life is. I know you about your cats. I wouldn't have known about your cats unless I came over. Yeah. But I feel more close and more connected to you, and I think there's a lot of value in that, and building friendships and building relationships from that.
Yeah, it's a little weird to my family sometimes, because people come up and recognize them or do things, and like my older son has asked me to stop posting pictures of him.
Yeah, they'll do that, especially at that age, I feel like.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure to have you. Where can people find you online?
Top Cow has feeds under Top Cow, Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, pretty much every platform. You can find me on Facebook. It's Self-Loathing Narcissist is the handle. Or if you just put Matt Hawkins in the leader, it'll pop up either me or the South African rugby guy. And the guy that looks big and with all the tats, that's not me. But on Twitter, it's just Top Cow Matt.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.